Hello, thanks for tuning in today. I'm Deanna at A Fiber Addict, and today I'd like to talk to you guys about what you really need to purchase, such as materials, and what you really need to know in order to get started with crochet. Crochet can be a very fun, relaxing activity, but it also can be a little overwhelming for somebody who's just trying to get into it. The most important thing to have when you get ready to crochet is motivation. Because crocheting can be difficult, especially when you're just starting out, so you really need to find something that motivates you to want to continue. For me, I've always found motivation in dream projects that I wish to create, either for myself or for other family and friends. Such as this hat. I really want to learn how to do these stitches in this hat, and so I kept trying and learning how to do the rest of the hat until I got to these stitches. And then when I did them, I felt really accomplished. So finding a dream project that you want to make either right now or just eventually is really going to help you stay on track and convince you to pick up that hook after you've set it down for the 5th time. So you really only need 3 materials in order to get ready to start crocheting. Those 3 things are some yarn, a crochet hook, and scissors. Any sort of scissors will do, and we'll go over the different varieties of yarn and crochet hooks available for your options. Some other things that you might find useful, but that aren't necessary in order to get started with crochet, is a measuring tape to measure your finished pieces and any gauge swatches you do. Stitch markers, or those could be substituted with safety pins, although you could also just count your stitches. And a darning needle, or a latch hook in order to weave in ends for your project. However, you can also just use a crochet hook for this. Now I would like to talk to you about different yarn varieties and what you want to choose when you're just getting started with crochet. If you go to the yarn section of any craft store, it's overwhelming amount of varieties of yarn. And the thing that you want to look for is you will want to find a light in color, medium or worsted weight yarn that's 100% acrylic. Both of these yarns meet those standards. I'll show you here where you can find that information. This is a medium 4, light in color, 100% acrylic. (100% acrylic, light in color, medium 4. Red Heart Super Saver yarn is the most recommended for beginners. However, I personally prefer Big Twist Value yarn, which is Joann's brand, and it is available at the similar cost, if not cheaper, because it goes on sale so often at Joann's. If you don't have a Joann near you though, the Red Heart Super Saver is widely available at a bunch of different retailers, including Walmart, and it is also a good beginner yarn to work with. As I mentioned previously, the variety of yarn available can be very overwhelming, especially for a beginner who's just trying to figure out what yarn they need to work with for their first project. So here I have a variety of different types of yarn that you can just look at and see the difference between. This yarn by the Hook Nook Small Stuff is a 3 or DK weight yarn. It's also 100% acrylic, and as you can see, it's like a medium color. When comparing the 2 yarns between the DK and the medium, you can see that the DK strands are just slightly smaller than the medium weight. If you choose to pick a DK weight yarn for your first project, it isn't going to have that much impact. It'll be fine. It's not like a beginner cannot work with a DK weight, and a lot of crocheters actually prefer DK weight compared to worsted weight. However, picking a DK yarn is going to mean that you're going to be working with a smaller hook size, and so you're going to have to be able to manage smaller stitches and hooks, which is why a worsted weight is most recommended for beginners. Now, you don't want to go too big with your yarn either. This one, the Hook Nook Yummy, is a 5 or bulky weight, 77% acrylic, 20% wool, and 3% viscose. Viscose is what gives it these little tweedy sections on it. And as you can see, comparing these yarns together, the bulky weight is larger than the worsted weight. Again, if you choose to work with a bulky weight, I actually love this yarn personally. It's not going to have that much of an impact on your project. And it's not that you won't be able to do anything, but it might fray slightly easier than the worsted weight. Just because the strands are so much larger, you can tell that it will kind of start fraying here. And it might just be slightly more difficult to work with a bigger hook. A medium weight yarn takes about a medium sized hook, which means that it's very easy to hold from most hands. And then this super bulky weight yarn, 6 super bulky, is also 94% acrylic, 6% rayon, which is a sort of nylon. As you can see, it's fraying slightly too at the end. And compared with our worsted or medium weight yarn, it's much thicker. When it comes down to it, the yarn that you pick is going to be fine no matter what it is. If you pick a dark colored yarn such as this, you'll just want to make sure that you're working on a light background. But these lighter colored yarns are going to give you more variety of a background that you can work against and still see your stitches, which is why light colors are more recommended for beginners. And working with a heavier yarn is just going to impact, or a lighter yarn, is just going to impact the size of hook you pick. And that's why worsted weight is recommended, because the hook size and the stitch size tends to be more manageable for a beginner to both see and be able to hold and then insert the hook into. Now, if you decide to go to a local yarn store in order to get your hand-dyed yarn made by small businesses, then you might not get the same sort of labels out of the yarn. As you can see here, this yarn label is much smaller, and the back of it only includes the colorway, the fiber type, the weight, and the yardage in grams. This one includes the same information, just in a different form. The color, the weight, the fiber, the yards, the grams, and the ply. Compared to a box store yarn, which on the label is going to have the yards, the ounces, the grams, the number of skeins you would need to do certain projects, so a scarf, a hat, a sweater, a blanket, as well as where we'll find our information for our hook, knitting needle size, hook size, yarn weight, color. So if you don't have a label such from a store brand yarn, you might have questions about what type of hook to pick. We'll be discussing hooks selection in our next segment. Picking a hook can also become a little overwhelming for some individuals. As you can see here, there's a variety of different materials to choose for your hook, such as wood, aluminum, plastic, or acrylic. There's also options of just a regular handle or an ergonomic handle. And when it comes to picking what hook you want to use, it's an entirely personal choice. You're going to find yourself leaning towards different materials and different sort of handles depending on your own hand and how you like to crochet. Personally, I prefer these ergonomic handle crochet hooks, although sometimes I wish that the actual hook portion was larger because I find myself having difficulty stacking a lot of stitches onto one hook. The choice of material that you choose to get your crochet hook in is going to be mostly a personal choice. It'll depend on what yarn you're using, what you want your finished product to be, and also your own personal preference on what you enjoy holding and working with the best. But overall, these aluminum hooks are going to be the easiestly available to find, and also they're going to be the cheapest option. So if you want to just buy one single crochet hook, you'll probably end up buying one aluminum hook, and they're a good place to start for beginners because they're relatively cheap. A larger consideration when choosing your crochet hook is going to be what size you want rather than what material. So try to focus on that, because depending on what you want your finished product to look like, the crochet hook that you choose is going to have a big impact on that. As you can see here, I've crocheted the same yarn in the same stitch with 3 different sizes of crochet hooks, and their samples all look different. They'll vary in how loose or tight they are and how large the overall sample is, even though I did the same amount of stitches in each. The way to find what recommended yarn hook to use on any big brand yarn is going to be just looking at the label, knitting needles, crochet hook. You can see here it recommends an H. For beginners, often with a worsted weight yarn, either an H or an I hook is going to be recommended because it's going to be the easiest one to work with that size yarn. If you're working with a hand-dyed yarn and it doesn't include the crochet hook recommendation on the label, then on my blog, which I have linked down below, I have a table which shows recommended hook sizes depending on the yarn weight. Overall, I would recommend going towards the bigger end of the scale for your hook size when you're just starting out, and wait until you get really comfortable with the yarn before you scale down in size. When learning to crochet, there are some simple techniques that are going to help you start out. You'll want to learn how to do a starting chain and also a magic circle to start a project, and this will allow you to crochet both flat projects as well as circular projects. Additionally, there are 5 main stitches that you'll want to learn in order to get started with crochet. You'll want to learn how to single crochet, how to half double crochet, how to double crochet, how to treble crochet, and how to slip stitch. These stitches will allow you to do a variety of beginner projects, as well as to learn how to combine these stitches to form different stitches in order to add texture and interest to your projects. For all of these, you can simply search those terms into YouTube, and I'll have some recommended videos linked down below as well. I'd like to thank you guys all for coming to watch my video, and in the future I plan on doing videos on how to do those starting methods and also the starting stitches so that you can get started with your first project. If you'd like to join in and see those, please subscribe and click the bell notification.